right, well, welcome to our spring Fireside chat. At the beginning of the year, we set out to host 2 Fireside chats where we would discuss the 6 tenets of the vision of the graduate. So in the fall, we went after the 3 C's, which was curiosity, creativity, and communication. And tonight, we're going to spend some time on the other 3, which is empathy, independence, and integrity. Before we jump in, anything you want to add for?
Well, I'd just like to welcome everyone and thank you for coming this evening. And we'll have a bit of a conversation here. I think there's some good stuff to talk about.
Yeah, agree. Hopefully, it's almost May, which is hard to believe. You know, we've been consistent with a vision of the graduate all year long. The Darien Difference has been highlighting the vision of the graduate in action every month, as all of the schools are recognizing just how important this is and to really highlight the different elements of it. So tonight we're going to start with a question on integrity. The vision of the graduate highlights integrity as adhering to principles in the face of social pressure. In today's digital age where social pressure is constant, why is this specific trait more critical for our graduates now than perhaps 10 or 20 years ago?
Well, first, let me say that when I think about the vision of the graduate as a whole, when you look at what the skills are and the abilities are and the tenets that we talk about, there is a basis for that need. So I'm going to go back to some comments I made at opening day for a convocation for the staff. It's really talking about what the needs of the workforce are today and what we think in the future. And I had an interesting conversation with someone today about technology and the idea of we have no idea what technology is going to be when the kids who are sitting in our kindergarten classrooms today.
It's hard to imagine.
It is hard to imagine when we think about the technology that our 12th graders are using now. Mm-hmm. Was there any technology other than maybe a first generation smartboard when they entered schools? So we look to the World Economic Forum. They do an annual report, Future of Jobs. The OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, they did a report not long ago called Skills for 2030. And McKinsey & Company recently released a report called Defining the Skills Citizens Will Need in the Future World of Work. And so when I think about our kids in Darien, I think about that information that I've learned in that research. I'm just going to give you a bulleted list of a bunch of the skills that our kids need. Analytical thinking, creative thinking, empathy and active listening, resilience, flexibility, and agility, technological literacy, communication, collaboration, leadership, social influence, motivation and self-awareness, and curiosity, continuous lifelong learning. So when I think about all of those skills together, and I think of the vision of the graduate, and more specifically thinking about tonight's topic, integrity, clearly, you just flip on the news or open a newspaper today, we have an issue with integrity in our society, not just here, but across the globe. It's missing in a lot of spaces. And there also, couple that with this tremendous pressure to look a certain way, to win at everything and be perfect. I think what we want are kids who grow into adults who are honest, principled, they lead by example, and those things are just really seem to us and seem to me are more necessary today than ever before.
Agree. And I think we see it across all of our schools with our kids, right? I mean, they're certainly getting the right practice, hopefully, to put into practice when they leave, our halls.
They certainly are.
We also want our students to be independent, right? That's another very important skill, and forge their own path. Yet the vision also says they should seek guidance to help them grow, right? Those are sort of at odds with one another. How do we, as school leaders, create an environment where kids feel safe enough to fail, plus in our community, right? That's a tough one. so they can eventually become self-reliant.
So it's interesting. Earlier this week, we had another community event that was something we talked about in our communication plan that we were going to implement this year, and that was our parent university. And that parent university this Monday was focused on executive functioning skills. And the notion of opportunities to fail came up in that conversation. There were some great ideas on how families are supporting their kids to develop executive functioning skills, but there was one question about the family calendar. And that was, I never would have thought of this as a parent, but there were multiple folks in the room who talked about creating Google calendars and with families with multiple kids, color coding it so the kids knew sort of the things. But the first parent to talk about it talked about like events that required transportation and driving and getting to and from. Someone asked about putting things like tests, assignments, homework, things like that on the calendar for their child. My immediate reaction was no. And that did come out in the conversation, just thinking about
Too much.
that idea, the failing. It's a hard lesson to learn, but if we're not allowing our kids to experience what it's like to not be prepared for a project or presentation or an exam and fail, we're
Because they
taking
didn't have
something away from
preparation.
them.
Yeah.
And so on the bigger picture, when I think about the independence and for kids seeking guidance to help, the first thing you have to have are the relationships. Kids need to know in our schools that there are trusted adults that they can go to, and that there are trusted adults who are going to support them through difficulties, through good and bad, and they're going to be there to listen to them.
Yeah.
And if they don't know that those trusted adults are there, and that's a term we use a lot in our system, even when we fall down and screw things up, talking to kids about the ability to go to someone, talk to them, get advice, and really understand who they are and what they need to be successful. So to me, I think that's a huge piece, the trusted adults.
For that specific one, is there an age that we see within the system where that really turns on and they really understand that?
I think you start to see it looks different in elementary school. You know, as a former elementary school teacher, I would have kids mistakenly call me daddy in class, or you hear, ask some of our female colleagues, they've been called mom by their students. It just happens because they feel safe, comfortable, and it's a trusted adult to them. But you start to see that transition in middle school as kids are they're maturing and they're understanding the relationships. I think you certainly see that more where they'll seek out advice and deliberately thinking, this is my trusted adult I can go to. I also think that we do a lot of things in the schools that give kids the ability to propose ideas, bring them to fruition, and sort of plan out and map out. I mean, if you just look at clubs at our middle schools and high school, the club opportunities that kids have and the opportunities that the clubs have to run events. There's so many things happening in the schools that are student-driven, developed by kids, and really the clubs succeed or fail based on the students and what they bring to the table. And that's a great way to really develop your skills of independence.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. The next one is definitely one that I think we see a lot, which is wonderful, and even the frequency of it has increased, I think, greatly over the last few years, at least what I have seen. The vision of the graduate mentions radiating kindness and honoring the humanity of each person. When you specifically go through our schools, what does empathy actually look like in action? And can you share a moment that you've witnessed when a student really stood up for inclusion?
So I have so many. I mean, the empathy and it feels like every issue, every edition of the Darien Difference has multiple examples.
They
from
do.
The Super Bowl
caring. The Super Bowl of caring
at Royal. I'm thinking about the day I pulled in and dropped off 5 turkeys for the band's turkey drop.
Yep.
that we beat New Canaan.
Right.
Always
nice
to get
to have that
in.
extra layer
Yes,
underneath.
There's so many community-minded events and collections that are happening in the schools, but the notion of inclusion, we live that here. So I visit classrooms on a regular basis, and I was visiting a classroom, and there was a special education student from one of our self-contained programs who was in the room. They mainstream for certain kids, depending on their individual program, they mainstream into a classroom. It was a second grade classroom during reading instruction, and the student with special education needs was with the class right on the rug, and when they broke off to go work and read, immediately children went right to the student and they had their group. And it was automatic. There was no
one had to
prompting the general education students
Right.
to join their peer. It just happened. And it is so natural. And sometimes I think the notion of the notion of inclusion is harder for adults than it is for our kids. And the more they experience inclusion growing up, from the first day they walk through our doors,
The more inclusive they'll be.
in our
later.
ELP program,
Yeah,
which
yep.
is fully inclusive. I think about the World Mental Health Day celebration. I believe that was back in October, and one of my early experiences working with kids to make something happen, because high school students reached out to me and wanted to share their idea of putting messages of kindness and caring throughout the schools. They created a video, and meeting with Lindsay and her friends from the Wave Strong Club. That to me, and that message went across all 7 of our schools, and not just here at the high school. That sent me a message. I mean, there are countless examples I've seen on the fields and on the courts during competitions with our athletes, and in the high school cafe. Kids, I just walk in, sit down,
And observe
talk to
them,
kids,
yeah.
and they are welcoming, they are inclusive, and you could not figure out how groups ended up, but
Yeah.
groups are there, and kids are supporting each other and enjoying each other. It's beautiful to see.
Yeah. It's funny, as you know, I had 3 kids who went through all the Darien public schools. My youngest graduated last year. And as a PR professional, all of these traits that we're talking about are things that we look at in our workplace all the time. When we're giving feedback to our employees, these are the things that we're seeking and we're looking for. And so to see this, and I look at my own kids, and I know one of my daughter is a professional now, right? She's in the workforce, and we talk about all of these things still, and just the foundation I think that she has from being a student of this district, I think is pretty incredible. Which is going to pivot us to the next one, which is, as district leaders, we are also graduates of our own life experiences, right? So there's a modeling piece to this as well. Which of these 3 pillars for you, empathy, independence, or integrity, has been the most challenging for you to model in your own professional journey? And how do you keep your own moral compass aligned during tough decisions?
It's a great question. I did a lot of reflection with this one. And I wanted to throw another one in there, because it really sat with the independence piece. And for me, it's not, I'm a very independent person, but working in a system where you have policies, regulations, laws that sometimes have forced me to navigate a situation in a way that I would rather not follow. I would rather follow a different path.
Right.
So that compliance impacted independence. But I think that's an incredible lesson for our kids to learn, because they will be working in systems in their lives, and they may not always agree with the way of work that they have to follow. Sometimes they don't agree with the way they have to do a project or an assignment in school.
Right.
And I think it's an important lesson to learn. But for me, I would say that's the independence. I'm fiercely independent. I tell this to people all the time. I am not the most compliant of all. I certainly the board knows, I push back and have gotten myself in trouble with, in New York with the state on a number of occasions because I didn't like the way they were mandating something. Not a big fan of mandates, but understanding that sometimes we do have to follow a path that we may not have designed ourselves.
Yeah. All right, our last question before we open it up to our audience for questions. If a student truly masters the balance of being independent enough to think for themselves, yet empathetic enough to collaborate with others, what kind of impact do we envision them having on the world once they leave here?
Well, one, I think, when I walk through our schools, visit our classrooms, sit in our cafeteria, seeing the inclusive community that we are and the inclusive spaces that we have in our schools, our kids will build stronger, more inclusive communities across the world because they are so connected across the globe in ways that we couldn't be at their age, certainly I can at my advanced stage. I couldn't be, and they're so much more welcoming and inclusive naturally. It's just an incredible thing. So I believe they will build stronger, more inclusive communities. I think they will heal things that need to be healed and solve the wicked problems that we always face wicked problems as a global society, but I think we are setting our kids up to hopefully have the skills, the ability, and the persistence to be able to solve some of those wicked problems, from flooding issues that are not uncommon right here in our neighborhood to, some of the divisiveness that we see in our world today, and perhaps bringing people together. I have a lot of hope for our children.
Well, I'll say this, if I can say this. I have actually hired more than a few Darien High School graduates. In fact, I employ a few of them right now. And I will tell you, I never push them. They follow the same path as every other candidate that comes through our doors. And they stand out and they shine and they're excellent employees and they're collaborative and I do think foundationally they are getting something really, really special, and they carry it. I literally see it every day. So in case you're wondering if it actually happens in action, I can give you names.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So we'd love to open up if you have any
questions.
Okay, so we have a small crowd here tonight, and we're going to wrap up the recording for the questions from the individuals in the group. But we thank you for tuning in, and we thank you for joining us for this second Fireside Chat of the year. And we will bring them back again next year. So thank you very much and have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.